Welcome to Inside the Outside. I'm Gary Kirk.
And I'm Christy Kirk. On this episode, we're talking with Mark and Jonathan, the hosts of Hang Your Own Hang, the must-listen podcast for anyone interested in hammock camping.
It's time for the interviewers to be interviewed. With 40 episodes under their belt, the Hang Your Own Hang guys are going to share some of the insights that they've picked up along the way. So, Jonathan, Mark, thanks so much for joining us today. Can you tell me a little bit about what got you guys into this whole podcasting world and what, like hammock camping? What the heck? I mean, that's sort of a very niche audience.
I'll speak first. This is Jonathan. I guess I'd always been an avid listener of audiobooks, and when they came out podcasts, I have a long commute to the next city over that I'd been doing for years. And I'd begun kind of an obsession with hammock camping, and we might get into that a little bit later when we talk about your first hammock or whatever. But the two kind of coincided. I was kind of stuck in hammock camping. You get into that loop where you're always looking at the forums and stuff, and it's a little bit of an obsession. And I was telling a friend about it, and he said, "Well, find a way to get finished on it, find a way to get complete on that obsession. You're stuck for some reason." And certainly getting into a podcast was a good way to get unstuck. It gave me a chance to kind of give back and participate in a way that I couldn't do because I can't camp enough.
I know whenever I discovered you guys, I had only been hammock camping for a little while. I'm a podcast junkie, and I was looking for, something related to the outdoors to listen to. And I couldn't believe it when I ran across a podcast that was specific to the thing that I was obsessing over at the moment. I think you would agree when you drink the Kool-Aid of hammock camping, it is like being part of this cult. Some could call it a family, but, my wife, initially, she's like, oh my gosh, I think she had heard, more than she cared to hear about all the geeked out stuff related to hammock camping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was with Jonathan and with his son and my son, both in the same Boy Scout troop. That's where we started getting into backpacking more. And that led to the actual hammock camping. Jonathan got me on it and all. And basically, I think it was at a scout meeting. He's, it was one of those things. Hey, I want to run something by you after the meeting. And sort of just said, hey, you want to do this? You don't have to do any work. You just got to do the interviews once a month, and I'll do all the production work. Do you want to have a go at it? And I thought about it for about 3 seconds and said, what the heck? Yeah, sure. How hard could it be? And
little did you know.
Yeah, 40 some odd episodes later, here we are. One of the great things doing this is putting at least voices to forum names and manufacturers that everybody that we've spoken to over the last 3 or 4 years so far. I think we're going on 4 years soon.
Yep.
So yeah, so it's been a lot of fun.
Well, your podcast has certainly helped a lot of people get into hammock camping and learn more about it. I wonder how you made the transition from tent camping to hammock camping.
When our boys were younger, Jonathan asked me, hey, do you want to go on a backpacking trip down in Ellicottville, which is about an hour south of Buffalo, along the Finger Lakes Trail, which is part of the North Country Trail. And I was in my tent. Him and his son were laughing at me because I probably had like a 60-pound base weight with my old Eureka Timberline tent that I was carrying for my son and I, and Jonathan and his son were both in hammocks. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. Then, I don't know, a couple Boy Scout meetings later, he said, hey, do you want to try my hammock? He wasn't going to be there. I was going to be there for the weekend. We went over to a local park, and he lent me his button sling hammock and a tarp that he had, showed me how to put it together. I just brought my pad and my sleeping bag for my insulation, and I had a great time. and it's all downhill from there. The hours on Hammock Forum, the hours of watching Shug's videos and Syntex's videos, and shopping on Dutchware and Hammock Gear, and that's all my spare time.
It's so funny the way that you describe that, because your description of your descent into this hammock madness is so similar to just about anybody's. When I was getting into it, the first thing I saw, I'm like, oh, that looks kind of cool, but it was very novel. And I'm like, yeah, I can't imagine camping in that. And my first experience with hammocks, I was actually in Malawi on a school trip with UNC, and there was this student. I woke up one morning and walked out, and she had an Eno stretched in between these two trees, and it was this beautiful morning. The sun was shining down, and it was just sort of magical. And she let me lay down in it, and I was on the verge of falling asleep when she booted me out and said, "Hey, I've got work to do." But whenever I got back to the States, all I wanted to do was jump on those forums and figure this whole thing out. So you mentioned that Jonathan had a Hennessy. So was that your first hammock, Jonathan?
Yeah, I kind of went down a similar path as Mark. I decided that the tent that I was carrying was just driving me nuts. And I started going down the tarp/bivy path and almost went down that way. And then I saw this idea of a hanging bivy, right? That was how it was. That was how I actually found it. It wasn't that I was looking for a hammock, but I was sold on this system that Hennessy had put together. And I got lucky. I did the research, started learning about hammocks, and then somebody had the Hennessy ASIM Ultralight for sale in the for sale forums on the forums, hammock forums. And so Mark will tell you I'm kind of cheap.
There's nothing wrong with that. I'm cheap.
You're not the only one. That's why I started out with the Eno. I'm like, I want to keep this simple, budget friendly. Just grab a box and go set it up.
Yeah. And so I got lucky. It's like, that's the one that I was looking to get, and somebody wants to get rid of it. And so I started with that, and I still actually have that hammock, but I don't sleep in it very much anymore.
Mark, what was your first hammock? Did you jump into the Hennessy as well?
No, I'm cheaper than Jonathan.
So you made your own,
right? I also
right?
thought it was really weird too. The whole bottom entry thing, I think, freaked you out.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of weird myself.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sold on that. I actually was starting to look around. One day popped up on Woot was a Yukon double hammock. Ordered that for like $20 and some am steel to make some whoopee slings and to make an adjustable ridgeline. And I used that for probably about 3 years. It's nothing like what I'm using now, but it worked out great, and I still loan it out to people. My son uses it. It's worked out real good.
So what are you using now, though?
About a year and a half ago, actually, the day that Dutch put the Chameleon after he was done with the Kickstarter, I actually invested in a Chameleon. So that's what I've been using for, for the last year and a half, maybe. And with his modular system was what really sold me on it, with not having to invest the full amount in one time.
Yeah, that makes good sense. The modular approach.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, what are you camping in currently?
So I went all in on the Kickstarter as an early adopter or whatever they call it in Kickstarter.
Yeah, early bird or something.
Early bird, yeah. So I actually didn't get the early bird at the right time, but somebody abandoned a slot on the early bird, and I'm like, holy moly, I'm going to catch that. So I got one of the early bird slots. It piqued my cheapness again.
Hey, sometimes it pays to hold out a little bit.
Yeah, I was on the fence, and I saw that. I'm like, okay.
It's fake.
Take my money. But I got the tarp, the overcover, the bug net, and the Dutch hammock. So I'm sleeping in that. And then, of course, the modularity is what did it for me as well. So since then, I've also gotten the sidecar and the little storage thing on top. And
that's the gear loft, right?
The gear loft, yeah. And then he had the gear pocket as well that most people put on the Ridgeline, but it turns out it works really well in the sidecar to keep like little stuff from falling to the bottom. You can put it in the same spot and have your gear sitting at the top of the sidecar.
That's very cool. Yeah, Dutch has done a really good job about thinking about what do people need? You know, all those little niche items that fill those little needs that we all sort of think about when we're dozing off in our hammock. But he does a really good job of filling that in.
Oh yeah, that's the perennial question, right? Which is like with the sidecar, you know, everybody always asks, where do I put my stuff? Because I don't have a tent with an entranceway or a foyer.
Well, you both talked about how your rig has changed over the years. I'm wondering what other things you've noticed that have changed since you first started in hammock camping and now. What are some of those early mistakes you made that you've learned from?
Pads suck.
Don't they?
It's a good way to get started, but that plus just, you know, being impatient, you know, instead of buying the right thing right away. And I know it's hard to know what the right thing is, but you know, it's a little frustrating thinking about like having gone through several cycles because, you know, I tried to take a shortcut here or there or whatever. Like, yeah, I can go along with a pad for a while, but then I'm miserable and ended up spending the extra money anyways on a decent underquilt.
Yeah. How about you, Mark?
Well, since Jonathan usually buys stuff first before me, as you learn from his mistakes.
Wow.
You have got it figured out.
You know, hey, it's the way. Like, you know, like that first camping trip, he was freezing his butt off all night because he didn't have he was using super shelter, and I was in my tent, but I was sweating my you-know-what off.
Yeah.
I've been pretty lucky. One of the things with not being able to just go out and buy stuff is I don't really have any buyer's remorse on anything that I've purchased, in the sense that I decide to get something and it sits usually in the cart for like a month. So I'm always thinking about it, this and that. So by the time I actually get the money to actually purchase it, I've pretty much has my heart set on. I've all done the research. I've seen all the positive and negatives on the forums and other gear review YouTube videos and everything. So gear-wise, I don't think I really made any mistakes.
You let Jonathan
Luckily,
make them all.
wood. Yeah, of course. That's the great thing about the forums is, you know, everybody's willing to post their mistakes and see where where they made their mistakes and all, and post it and say, hey, I did this, don't do it again.
Yeah.
And seeing what other people did, so hey, then I won't do that either.
Yeah, Jonathan, when you started it off by saying pads suck, when I got into this, I was bound and determined there's no reason to go get an underquilt. I've already got a sleeping bag. I don't need this under and overquilt and all this stuff. I've got a pad, and I suffered on several initial outings, and then I was like, okay, I need to do something. So all I did was destroy a sleeping bag trying to make an under and an overquilt.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
You know, fortunately, I didn't totally destroy it. I can still use it as an one or the other. But initially I was like, I'm just going to cut a hole in the end and I'm going to pull my hammock through there. No, that was a bad idea. I was really uncomfortable and I was not warm. It was a horrible mistake. I finally threw the towel in and got me an under and over quilt, and the rest is history. If I could give anybody one really big tip, it's learn from our mistakes and go ahead and acknowledge that everybody that is doing this and has done it for a while, they're using some form of an under and an over quilt.
See, now I started with a pad as well, and I probably hammock camped for about a year using a pad, and I got down into, I don't know, like minus 10 degrees or something. And I was always comfortable. I never got colds at all. The big thing was just finding that sweet spot where everything just clicks. And when you go to bed at night, that might take you 10, 15 minutes, maybe longer, just moving things around. The pad that I was using, it was an inflatable pad, and it didn't really shift around at all. But finding that sweet spot, then falling asleep, and then God forbid you have to wake up in the middle of the night to go water a tree or something.
Yeah.
Nature calls, because getting back in the sleeping bag, and that's, you get in the sleep, because I would use the sleeping bag as a sleeping bag, not a top quilt.
Right.
So I had I'd unzip it because I know a lot of people would zip it down 3/4 of the way, just throw it on top of them. I would actually get in the sleeping bag, and it would take a long time to do that, but it worked for me at the time as I was researching what exactly I wanted to get.
I think if I had tips, I'd have a couple. One would be know yourself. Like I am not as big of a fan of top quilts as most other people in hammocks. In the wintertime, I'm still in a sleeping bag because I'm a very cold sleeper and I really hate drafts. And top quilts tend to be drafty for me. So knowing myself and knowing what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with is a big thing. The other is probably to take the time to test and to understand your gear and what its limits are. You see a lot. I'm not going to say a lot, but it's not unusual, especially in the popular press, where somebody will, some hip writer from wherever, writing for some outdoors magazine, goes out, tries hammocking one night, has a really super bad experience. One person got a bad experience because they got rained on.
Yep.
Thinking you didn't know to get a tarp. Somebody else, a vlogger that Mark and I have both seen on YouTube, tried using her homemade hammock kit, her first night on the AT.
Oh gosh.
And ended up bailing, and you can understand why.
Yeah.
And unless you're buying, a full kit, tarp, underquilt, top quilt, so insulation and weather protection, you gotta work through some of those problems, and you gotta be able to take the time to do that, in a place where you can bail if you have to as well.
Yeah, that is such a good point. Use your backyard or a local park or something to figure these kind of things out. And, you see so many people post about doing temperature tests in their backyard of, how low they could go in a particular setting. That is the best place to learn, all of your mistakes is the backyard, when you can bail out and go get a cup of hot coffee or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, being in Scouts was great. Has been great for both of us because there's always a cabin to bail out with too. Kids.
Yeah, that's what I use. But it's funny. What's like what were you saying about that one girl? It was amazing how many people went. I think it was it 2 years ago, Jonathan? I think we were down at Trail Days and we were interviewing these through hikers that were going through Damascus, and there was actually quite a few of them that were using hammocks. But the percentage of those that were using hammocks that their first night ever, not just sleeping, but setting up their hammock was their first night through hiking the AT.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Such a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they stuck with it. I think most of them that we did, but I couldn't believe how many of them were, of at least set it up in your backyard, like you said, or a local park or something, at least so you know how to put it on. I mean, you've got enough going through your mind that you've got 2,100 miles ahead of you, and you're just testing your gear that first night.
Yeah, it is surprising how many people hit the AT and are trying out boots and tents and hammocks and things. One of the big things when you're camping or hiking is trying to stay warm, especially in a hammock. The cold butt syndrome, everyone talks about that. And I know that you guys are in really cold country in Buffalo. I wonder how you've tackled it. I imagine it's something you had to think about really early on.
I don't really have any secrets. I think I'm just lucky that I'm more warm-blooded than I think most people are.
You are sick warm sleeper, dude.
I've got just my underquilt, and I usually don't even, just a pair of long johns is usually what I'm sleeping in a balaclava.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I do have a winter tarp, a DIY winter tarp that I bought I bought the kit from Ripstop by the Roll. So I can really batten down the hatches for that. If there's snow, I'll usually build up the ends so that cut any drafts off. And then, not too much, maybe take one of those heaters, the chemical heater things. I usually try and put that, right on the elastic of my boxers, or my long johns, just to get right by your artery there to try and get the blood flowing good. but that's really it. I don't really do too much. I just deal with it.
Yeah, I'm a much colder sleeper than Mark is. I'm what they call a wuss.
No judgment, promise.
And I'm right there with you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd say there's a few things. One is understanding why you get cold in a hammock. Really having, taking the time to understand that is important. It's that breeze that pulls the heat off of you and out from under you. That's a big part of it. So there's things that you can do, even if you're trying to stay lighter in weight, that you can help to produce or reduce that. Like 2QZQ sells an underquilt protector, and it's just a piece of very light fabric. But it can make an underquilt perform 10, 15 degrees lower, surprisingly. So understanding that, dealing with moisture is a big part of it too. And to keep moisture from evaporating. So like where you're a little colder, maybe have a sit pad that you put under your butt or under your feet. I actually don't sleep with socks in the wintertime.
Really?
Because my feet tend to be cold. And your circulation is a big part of staying warm. And a lot of people think I'm crazy until they try it. Christy?
I'm listening.
Seriously, take your socks off. Once they dry out, the extra circulation on your feet, even if you're on the ground and not hammock camping, the extra circulation will keep your feet warmer once they dry out. And not wearing the socks will keep them dry. It's shocking.
All right, so we've got a frosty butt hang coming in 2 weeks. We're going to put that to the test because I am the kind of person, I'm a warm sleeper. I have no problem going down into some pretty good low temperatures with very light quilts or sleeping bags. However, my feet are always cold. My feet are cold right now and I'm in the house, but, so I'm going to put that to the test and I'll get back to you on that. I would love to find a way to be able to keep my feet warmer because I've found if I can keep my head and my feet warm, the rest of my body, whether it's placebo or whatever, the rest of my body seems to think it's warm.
Yeah. I can't guarantee you. But
we're not going to put any money on this. I won't hold you to it,
I would put $5 down on this one. Seriously. It's been so effective for me. Dry your feet off, get your feet into your underquilt, into the little foot box. Don't put socks on, especially like layering up the socks because you drop your circulation and your feet get cold.
Very good point. I'm anxious to try this out because I'll try anything once, maybe twice if I like it.
Yeah, I'll definitely try it. And I have a plan B on this frosty butt hang that we've got coming up. I know where the hotel is, not too far away.
Yeah, we've done a few trips that were down in some low temperatures, and there's no shame if the car is close. Just get out because at the end of the day, it's about having a good time.
It's about getting rest. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The only other thing I'd toss out there is if you're backpacking or even car camping, the hot water bottle thing with a good Nalgene really does work. So that I assume you guys are familiar with that.
Yes.
So that works really well.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of it. I've never personally tried it because here's my thought process. When the water gets cool, I'm going to be in the bed with a cool bottle of water. I don't know if that's, going to be a factor that would then cause my feet to get cool. Have you guys actually tried that method out?
I haven't.
I have. That got me down to my lowest, which was 12 degrees.
Holy cow. Yeah. Very, very good. I've been down in the teens a couple times in my hammock and I've done fine. My feet have been a little chilly, but I usually just go with a fresh, dry pair of heavy wool socks, loose fitting because you do bring up a really good point with the circulation. But, I always, maybe it's a mental thing. I feel like I have to have socks on. So we've talked about car camping, backpacking, hiking, and that kind of thing. What kind of outdoor activities do you really enjoy? What is it that gets you off your butt and moving around?
I like doing the long hikes. I mean, car camping, I enjoy it, but I'm not one to really stand around hanging out. I will at night, around the campfire, but after doing that all day, I have to keep busy all the time. I like doing the hiking. I'd like, maybe, 10, 15 miles because usually we're driving an hour and a half or so to get to the closest place and then get situated, do our hike, maybe stop for a long lunch or something. and then get to camp and then do our camp chores.
I like car camping with my family because I prefer to do all the camp chores. So that keeps me very busy. But I agree with Mark. I'd rather be doing long hikes if I'm going to be hiking.
Yeah, I think that's the area that Christy and I, it's sort of what brought us to a mutual agreement was the hiking. She does not like to camp. I actually love to camp. I can hang around camp. Now, I want to be camping near water, so that usually means I'm going to be fishing during the day. But for Christy, the only way that I could get her out in the wilderness, she said, you've got to hike me far enough into the woods that I'll be too tired to go back to the car. And so we went on the AT, and the rest is history. I got her all the way out there, and in spite of all the mistakes that we made, the lessons that we learned, we agreed that we actually loved it, and we were gluttons for punishment, if you will. But it's been a really fun experience because we like that hiking. Even if we go and set up sort of a base camp, we want to hike out from that and go experience things. We're not going to just sit around in that one spot, or at least she's not.
Yeah, my wife isn't really that fond of the backcountry camping. So I do enjoy the hiking with her, the day hiking and stuff with her, and she'll do very long hikes. We're starting to work through the 42 high peaks up in the Adirondacks.
Oh, nice.
So I acknowledge that idea that the two of you worked out what works for both of you.
Yeah.
Because that's the most important part of that conversation.
Yeah, you have to find a middle ground that you can both agree on. Otherwise, nobody's happy, and you're not getting to do the things that you love. And it really worked out for us.
No, and I do love the hiking, and I understand your wife not enjoying the backcountry camping. I don't really enjoy that either, but if I'm tired enough, it's okay.
Yeah.
And some of the places we've gone, I couldn't see them any other way. So to me, the camping is the price to pay to see some of those amazing views.
Yeah.
But I do wish there were little cabins or hotels in the backcountry.
Well, my wife hasn't realized that you can't do all 42 without a couple of overnights.
Okay, we'll edit that part out. We won't let her know.
But I'm trying to work through what I can do to make her more comfortable. Like I've got a friend who spoke very highly of the Sea to Summit backcountry sink.
I actually have one of those.
Yeah, so like maybe if we know it's got to do it, it's gonna have to do it anyways. Maybe heating up some water and giving her some fresh water to just to wash her hair or whatever in the morning. Those kind of things are the things I'm kind of starting to work through, because I know at some point it's going to be a conversation that we need to answer those questions, or we not accomplish this particular goal.
Yeah, and really and truly, at the end of the day, it's totally worth adding those extra ounces or whatever to your pack to make sure that she has a good experience. Because I remember we went on our first hiking trip. My ultimate goal was to make sure that Christy had a good experience so that we could do it again. Now, I don't know if she would call it a good experience, because we learned a lot of lessons on those first couple ones. But, I must have done a decent job, because she is continuing to return.
Yeah. I mean, what's your experience been like, Christy? What are those things that make it a little bit more tolerable?
Little luxuries. So you're talking about the portable sink. I think that's a great idea. Food that you can't necessarily have multiple days of the hike because it's perishable or whatever, but having it that first night and having that treat, those are things that help.
Yeah, we started the first sort of backpacking trip was very sanitized. We were at a state park, and we only had to go a couple miles. It was only 1 mile of a hike back out to get to a place that had a restroom and showers if you wanted it. And I packed in some food, so that we ended up having smoked salmon fresh off of the fire. We made some shrimp scampi. I figured out a way to make cheesecake. You name it. I wanted that experience to be top-notch, 5-star gourmet out in the field. Now, you can't do that when you get, 30 miles down the trail, but on that particular weekend, I wanted to make sure she had a good experience.
The hardest part, I think, for me with the multiple day backcountry is that you are dirty, you feel kind of gross, and, there are no restrooms, and you have to learn to cope with that. And once you get past that, your first trip, it's easier every time. But little luxuries make a difference.
So I'm curious, you guys are like my go-to hammock camping people. On your podcast, you guys are interviewing everybody. You sort of have your fingers on the pulse of the hammock camping world. What are some trends that you're seeing in the hammock camping world right now?
I don't know. You know what? I've noticed, actually, I don't even know if, Jonathan, if you saw, there was a comment on our website. Somebody posted about another integrated underquilt hammock that there seems to be more and more of those coming. I think there's been seeing some more of the pod system, some more cold weather gear.
Mm-hmm.
There's all the new fabrics. You know, Ripstop's got the, are they the Outdoor Ink, is it?
Yep.
So that, customization for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I know Dutch has his own as well.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a little bit today because this one's a challenging one. I can say one thing is that there's been a bigger penetration in the consumer market with cheap products, which is unfortunate. It's getting more people out there, but you're seeing a lot of cheap 9-foot hammocks with ropes, for instance. They're in bins at Walmart, in the aisle, which, tells you something right there. You're also seeing, I think, more in the consumer space at the higher end, more thoughtful products that are the systems, as opposed to, one of the things that the four of us really kind of experienced was kind of working through putting the system together for ourselves. What topper am I going to use? What suspension? And, you are starting to see vendors putting the systems together for their consumers so that they don't have to think as much about that. Because as much as we like it as kind of nerds, hammock nerds, thinking about that, a lot of people, that's only a small part of their camping experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, for us, we're those gearheads. We like that kind of stuff. We geek out on, but there's a lot of people that, this is not their primary thing. So it's nice to be able to have one of those, sort of out of the box options. I've seen what you're talking about, the really low end things, but I like that there are some good quality vendors out there that, like you mentioned, the Dutch modular approach. That's a great way to be able to get into a high quality item and, have somebody like Dutch who, if you need to ask a question, you can pick up the phone and call him and he'll talk to you. He'll help you out. That's priceless.
I think, that penetration at the higher end of the market for people who aren't like kind of DIYing or building themselves is a big thing. That serves the market, I think, in a different way.
So recently we got to go down to South Carolina and test out a couple products for Terrapin Outfitters, who is now a sponsor of our show. And one of the cool things that they've come out with that on one hand, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so simple, which is the turtle tote. It is nothing more than a double-ended stuff sack with a zipper on it. But the cool thing that they did is they figured out a way to where you can be able to have your entire hammocking system, whether it's the underquilt, overquilt, you name it, everything can all be pre-assembled and you stuff it all in there and you can deploy your entire rig in like under 2 minutes. It's that accessory industry that I'm noticing the next wave of innovation happening. There's only so much you can do to invent a quilt, or reinvent a quilt. So, stuff like that, the turtle tote's cool. The Dutch pup tent, I thought that was pretty cool, or the hang time hook, these little things that, like Chrissy had mentioned, those luxury items.
What I need is warm. And so I like hearing about the modular hammocks with the built-in underquilt because I use an underquilt year round. Well, I guess most people do, but I use everything you can use to keep that hammock warm year round. It doesn't matter what the temperature is. It's never warm enough for me. So I love all those modular options. I think those are great innovations, and I love hearing that companies continue to make quilts better and warmer and more comfortable.
Yeah. We were talking to Warren Ashworth from Cedar Ridge a couple days ago, and I told him the next thing he needs to make is a heated underquilt. Christy would buy that today if there was some type of a battery-powered USB connectivity device that would heat up her underquilt for her.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they've got the jackets and everything now that I see in the construction, the stores and stuff, I think Milwaukee and DeWalt, they're all making them now. But
take a look at the underquilt protector, though.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because it's similar. Like you mentioned, if you need a windbreaker, you can throw this really light fabric on you. It cuts the wind and really increases your durability and the warmth of whatever jacket you might be wearing at the time. So it only makes logical sense that it would work on the underquilt.
Well, I will be seeking out an underquilt protector. My underquilt's great, but like I said, the warmer, the better as far as I'm concerned.
It'll push it down.
Yes, I can't wait to try that.
So as we wrap things up, I'm curious, what do you see as the future for hammock camping? Do you have any parting words about, that crystal ball look into the future?
I think it's only going to keep getting bigger. I think that as it gets bigger, I'm hoping, especially after speaking, I forgot his name, who was speaking from the Utah State
from
Park.
The state parks. Yeah.
I think that they may jump on the bandwagon where we might see more hammock sites. I don't think it's a fad that's just going to go away. I just hope it's I like the slow growth sense of it, where I don't want too many people just jumping out and then giving all of us a bad name and causing problems in the state and the federal parks.
The other side of it is an ongoing hope I have, which is to continue to see the camping hammock as a complete system to penetrate more into the consumer space. These thought out systems that include weather protection and insulation as part of the kit, so that more people can go and enjoy it and have a great experience. And there'll be less need for people like us to advocate for it as outsiders, that it'll just be a normal part of the options that people have for camping.
Well, Mark and Jonathan, I really appreciate you being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I hope we can get together again someday, maybe find each other on the trail somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, we enjoyed the time. Thank you.
Inside the Outside is proudly brought to you by Terrapin Outfitters. Terrapin Outfitters is an innovative company that specializes in developing clothing and gear that enhance people's enjoyment of outdoor activities. Check them out at terrapinoutfitters.com.
And follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Look for the handle Inside the Outside Show.
For links to our social media and other stuff that we talk about in the show, be sure to check out the show notes and our website, insidetheoutsideshow.com.